right, hello everybody. And I don't know, it's hard to follow up such a good act as Annette, but I'm going to try. This session is Systems Settings for Success, and essentially it's mostly some library master settings that most people may not be taking full advantage of. So we're going to do that. And I'm Karen Roberson, and we have Lisa Brewer, who's going to be assisting also. And so what's in store right now, we are going to have a lot of information. We're going to look at some company preferences that might make your life a little easier, and some user preferences, some themes and color options, report settings, task scheduler, activity log, sales tax, and custom lookups. There's a lot of information that we're going through. So we're going to be pushing our time limit. If well, I'll get to that in a minute. You will at the end of it, you will get a PDF of these slides, and you also get a link to the recordings. So if I'm going kind of fast, I apologize. I just have a whole lot that I'm trying to get through today. So just a reminder, in case there's anybody here that wasn't in Annette's session, a few housekeeping items. We've got a Q&A box, so if you've got questions, put it in that Q&A section, and we probably won't have time to answer them, but we will get back to you afterwards. I promise. If you're having any kind of technical problems, then use the chat for that, so that we've got Solana available to help you get situated. And again, at the end of the session, we're going to do a spin to win. Everybody that is on the session will have an opportunity to win a $25 Amazon gift card. And then if you stick through all of the sessions today, then the very last one, we're going to have a $100 Amazon gift card. And away we go. I am going to turn off my camera. And so we're going to start with some company preferences. In Library Master, you have company maintenance. And there is let's see, depending on what version you're on, it may be a different tab, but in the most recent version, tab 3 has the preferences. So this is company code ABC. And you'll see the very first option down here is to print user log on reports. So if you've got a lot of users and you have some network printers, if you're like most businesses, people are printing reports and then they send it out and it sits there on the printer and nobody knows who prints it. So if you check that box at the bottom of your standard Sage reports, it will print that user's logon. And then the next option down here, return city name in all caps. Some businesses, when they're putting in like their customers and vendors, they use all capital letters. And if you check that box here, after you type in the zip code, when it automatically fills in the city name, it will put that in all capitals. And then down here, this section, ALE lookups, that's basically your magnifying glass. So anywhere where you click on the magnifying glass, that's an ALE lookup. And you can see here we have options to display inactive vendors, inactive customers, inactive items, and inactive and restricted warehouses. So when that is checked, when somebody does a lookup, for example, on the vendors, it will show those vendors that have been set with an inactive status. If you want them to not show, then you can click that off. And just one word of warning on that, we have had clients who have turned that off, and then they find that what's happening is they'll have users that go ahead and create a vendor, and the vendor was already in there set as inactive. So, depending on your business situation, determine what is the best setting for you. And moving right along. There we go. User preferences. So Also in Library Master, you have user maintenance, and these are settings you can put in for each user. So here's my login, and I have a Preferences tab, and I have this first setting for automatic log off. If I click that, then I have an option over here where I can put a log off delay in minutes. So if somebody is logged into Sage 100 and they sit idle, so like if I had that set for 60 minutes, if I didn't get into anything in Sage for 60 minutes, it would automatically log me off. Right? Another important one. This one, we talk to people a lot about this one. This is the implied decimal point. So like if I type in the number 10, is it going to come up as $10 or is it going to come up as 10 cents? When that is clicked on, like I have it here, when I type in 10, it will come up as 10 cents. If I click it off, then 10 will go in as $10. And two more over here. So this prompt for company code. So if you've got multiple companies within Sage and you have the issue where you log in and it's like, okay, which company am I in? And you might accidentally go into, you're thinking you were logged into one company and you were in a different one, and you make an entry into the wrong one. Well, checking this box, every time you open Sage up, it will prompt you and ask you which company code you want. So there's less chance of you accidentally being in the wrong company. And another favorite of mine, this default report preview zoom. So you know how your standard Sage reports, when you open them up, they're so small you can't read them. So you have to go up to the zoom button and you have to enlarge it so you can actually see it on the screen. So if you set this, and you've got 150%, there's 200%, you've got a lot of different options in there. That way it will automatically come up zoomed for you. So that is a great option. And again, these are per user. All right, so we're going to jump into some sales tax now. So when you go into customer maintenance, or when you're doing an invoice or sales order, you have to define what tax schedule you're going to use. So I'm picking one that's a little bit complicated. This is Wisconsin, and this is for Milwaukee. You'll notice here I have 3 tax codes. I got WI, WI, MIL, and WI, MIL, MIL. Now, I'm not really that familiar with Milwaukee, but we're going to go back, work backwards through this. So this tax schedule has 3 tax codes. So once you select that tax schedule, it knows what's associated with this. So it will go through, and I'm going to show you tax code WI, MIL, MIL. That has been defined, that I have down here my tax class that's taxable. It is 0.5% is the tax rate. So notice that that's been set. So if I do a sale on an item that's assigned as taxable and somebody uses this tax schedule, then it will charge the 0.5%. And if you want to track your purchases, the sales tax on your purchases, you can also use that option here. And then some states or some taxing localities have a taxable limit. You can define that also. And you'll notice that, jumping around a little bit here, I've got my taxable freight. So, like here in Kentucky, freight is taxable, so that would be checked, and we would have the tax rate on that line also. And then you will see my line 2 of my tax schedule up here, my WI-MIL. You will see I have this tax code. And on this one, our taxable is defined as a 1% tax rate. And I'm going to go one more. So this is line 1, my Wisconsin tax code. That is defined with a 5% tax rate. So when I use tax schedule, it looks back at what tax codes are assigned to it. So any invoice would take this 5% plus 1% plus 0.5%. So 6.5% would be charged. And then when you do your sales tax reports, it will break that out for you to make the reporting of your sales tax reports easier. All right, so now we're going to look a step further back, and we're going to look at tax classes. So by default, we get non-taxable, taxable freight, and taxable. So sales tax class maintenance, we've had a few clients over the years where we have had to define a new tax class. And the one I've used most often is there are certain types of foods that are taxable in some states and not others. So we'll create, for example, FD for food, and then on those inventory items, we would assign it to that tax class. And so, for example, in Kentucky, let's say it's not taxable, so we would have down here on these lines FD, and that would be left as not taxable, and rate is 0. But for Tennessee, perhaps, maybe it is taxable, so we'd have FD here, and then we would put a tax rate, whatever the tax rate is, and then we would check the box for sales tax. So this gets very complicated very fast. Make sure that if you have anything complicated with your sales tax, that if you haven't already signed up for the webinar, I forget what time that one is, but if you want to drop something in the Q&A or the chat box, then we'll make sure we get you registered so that you can sit in on that webinar. Okay, let's see. So we're going to look at activity log. In the Library Master report menu, there is this activity log. So you'll notice down here at the bottom, it's showing show the last 30 days. So the newest versions of Sage 100, that's how it comes up. So it's usually pretty quick. For those of you who might be on some older versions, I want to give you a word of warning. Depending on how much activity you've had and how far back it goes, we have some clients where if we open the activity log, it literally takes all day for it to load. And while it's loading, it's out there and it's thinking and it's generating, and it can really slow your system down. So be aware of that. And it tracks things like here, you can see I made some changes to my company security, and then you can see down here there were some AR system parameters changed. When you double click on one of those lines, it opens up a window and gives you the detail. So we will frequently use this when we're researching, when somebody calls and says that there was an issue, something was working and now it's not working. So we'll go back and we'll look in the activity log and we'll look for something like this, because it'll show me that, hey, this company, this module, this user, and it shows the date and the time, and it tells me that, hey, I went into my system parameters, which is the accounts receivable setup options, and I changed my credit limit checking from the value of C to B. So very, very useful to do this. And you can also, if you're trying to find something very specific, there's a filter button over here. So you can use all these options to narrow down your list. This, if you need it, this also will track Visual Integrator. If you've got any Visual Integrator jobs, it records information related to those. And period end closings. It will show when those were run. All right, moving along so that we can cover the most amount of information. Library Master has something called Task Scheduler. So we most often use this, and Lisa, this is where you've used it more than I have, so if you've got anything to add to it, please chime in. But we use it for the Build Search Index. So for those of you who take advantage of, like when you're in vendor maintenance and you start typing in the vendor name, it searches for the whole name. It's not just what the vendor name starts with. You have to periodically run that build search index. So we set up a task where you can define that it'll schedule job. You can do it daily, weekly, or monthly. You can give it a start date and end date, and you designate what time you want it to run and how many times you want to run it. So you there is some setup. So you've got to define a Sage logon and also the Windows logon. So whatever computer you're on, it's going to set it up, and that computer will need to stay on so that it will run that at the designated time. And I point out, the other important thing is you have to define the type. So this one is set to other. You can also set reports and your journals and registers to run automatically. And then based on what type you designated, so mine was other, so I chose the modules, the system module, and then it lists all tasks that are available. So every day at 3 o'clock, it will run my build search index, so I don't have to remember to go in and run it. All right, here's another thing that's very handy, color themes. So especially if you have multiple companies, it's nice to set up different color schemes for the different companies, so that way when you open a screen, you know which one you're in. We also have some people who they don't like the contrast of the default screen, so they might use this to change that. So in Library Master, again, we have theme maintenance, and I have already defined this one that's called yellow, and I've just set my background to yellow, and then my tabs have the yellow color. So you've got a lot of different options here, and I can't show you all of them, unfortunately, but once you define a theme, then in company maintenance, so I'm back in company maintenance where we were earlier, where we were setting some preferences. And again, depending on what version you're on, you may have a separate tab for themes, or it may be something that's under your preferences. So in company ABC, once I defined theme code yellow, I was able to assign that yellow theme. And what happens now is when I open up my screen, I have a yellow screen. So this is one of those things where I warn you, you can get in and you can start playing, and before you know it, an hour has passed. That's one of the fun things that you can do. Okay, so let's see, how are we doing on time? Doing okay.
It's 10:18. You're just like 2 minutes behind where you wanted to be, so you're doing great.
All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so general ledger detail. I'm going to use that as an example. We have report settings. So let me get that back here. So standard report setting is what everybody gets by default. Now, what I find, especially with the general ledger detail report, a lot of people have things, so they'll always come in and they'll change that. I always want that to print my full comments, and I always want it to print condensed. So if there are things like that that you do where you're always making those changes, then put the changes on there that you want, and then come up here. See in the top right corner, I've got this save. I go to save as, and then I can give it a report setting name. I'll put test, and then under type, I can tell it that it's public, so everybody can access this report setting, or it's private, so it's only mine, or it's read-only, where yes, they can access it, but they can't make any changes to it. And I can also define if it's my default report. So I'm going to say okay to that. And to show you what that default does, I closed it. I'm going to open up the general ledger detail report again. And now notice my report setting is back. It is test now. So every time I open it up, because I set it but it's just for me that will be my default report setting. And there it is. My comments are full and my print condensed is checked on. And, you know, you can even use it. We've got many clients who use it to put in their bank accounts. So rather than have to come in here and select them every time, so they'll do the save as and name it bank. And I've seen people with like 20 different report settings to cover everything. All right, moving right along. I want to show you all with custom lookups. We've talked about it in prior meetings, but I still find that there are so many people who don't take advantage of it. So just about anywhere where you can do your magnifying glass and do a lookup, you have the option of creating a custom lookup. So I'm going to do a very simple one right now, and I want to add my sales tax schedule to my lookup. So I come down here in the bottom left and I do my custom. I give it a name, and I'm going to tell it I want it to be my default view. And I go next. So on the right, these are my columns that already display. And I come down here, double click, and I can add my tax schedule. And if I click on it on the right side, then I can just move it up. And I'm just going to finish shortcut this a little bit. So now anytime I do a lookup, because I said that that was my default, there's my default view, and there is my tax schedule. And if I wanted to make some additional changes, I can just go click on custom again and go back through it, and I can do any changes that I want. All right. I think I have covered everything. Have I missed anything, Lisa?
No, ma'am. That is perfect.
Any other words of wisdom you can add?
I think if you go back to the customer maintenance lookup that you had, just a quick, that once you create that custom lookup, you can also use that Excel button in the bottom right-hand corner to export that listing to Excel. That's a function that I think a lot of people don't utilize and or don't even know that's there. And that's it.
Good point. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So I think we are ready to turn this over to Falana to spin the wheel. So I will stop my sharing. And thanks, everybody. I hope you found this useful.
Woohoo! Okay, let's see who's going to win here. Give me 1 second to share the wheel. Can everybody see the wheel ready to roll? Let's do a quick spin. Okay. And looks like our winner. Oh my goodness. Okay. Is Caroline in from Martin Energy.
Did Caroline pay you?
She didn't. And you know what? Jody and I are just having a conversation about this. Today is Friday the 13th, and evidently Mercury is in retrograde. So,
well, Caroline's excited.
Congratulations to Caroline. Thanks, guys, for attending today. I will hand it back over to Karen here to wrap up.
All right. So let's see. Did we have a few minutes. Were there any questions? I don't see any. All right. Well, let's see. Actually, whoop, too far. So if you all think of any questions, you know, especially after you get the PDFs and the links to the session, you can reach out to me or Lisa, and we will be happy to help you with any questions that you have, or, you know, if you want to dive deep. I know I went through all of that very, very fast, but there's so much we wanted to share with you. So thank you all, appreciate it. And I'll see you all again at 11:30 with my next session. That one will be much more boring. I'm sorry, but see you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.